Okay, guys, today we are talking about the early 20th century, and that is when we're talking about the structural school of thought, the functionalists and others, behaviorists and others. So we understand that in this course, these are important topics. Having looked at the physiological antecedents and the philosophical antecedents, we are coming back and now into the science and the science of the modern activity of the psychology and where they came from. So the first is the structuralists, where we're talking about people like Hermann Wilhelm Wundt, yes, and Edward Titchener, right? So the structuralists as a school of thought are interested in the structure of the mind and the organization of basic elements of sensation, feelings, and images. They argue that every experience can be broken into primary components, primary units. Every experience, every sensation, that you can break it into different primary elements, basic elements, that word primary, into different units. Yeah, so their task was to discover the nature of every elementary experience. Yes, so they analyze components into various parts. They try to analyze every of your experiences, every experience you have, into several smallest and various parts. So Wilhelm Wundt created the first laboratory, as we know, in 1879, Leipzig, Germany, and could be regarded or called as the founder of academic psychology as we have it today. Yes, his method emphasized on a lot of, in fact, replications and relevance of replication and testing of phenomena several times, right? Although his work is not verifiable and subjective using introspection though, but he, as a scientist in those days, or regarded as father of science of psychology, practiced that replication and repetition of activities several times to get the same result. So, and he even tried it under different conditions. Yes, another person is Edward Titchener, as we said initially. He was the one that tested the method of introspection. Yes, and he established psychology as a scientific study. Yes, as a scientific discipline. He was the one that really had an empirical activity. Yes, by testing the method of introspection and establishing psychology as a scientific study or a scientific discipline. Yes. So the next theory or school of thoughts is the contribution of William James and the functionalist school of thought. The functionalism came as an opposition or protest against the structuralist school of thought. So whilst the structuralists are interested in components of consciousness, ideas, and sensation, functionalists focus on activities, perception, and learning. They want to see how this whole consciousness interpret to learning. Yes, they are not looking at the components and several parts of it. So the functional psychologists study relationship between the environment and the organism, because they were influenced by the work of Charles Darwin and adaptation. As we function, they believe that we behave in order to adapt in the environment and everything. So the chief, like we said before, that had his contribution here, or the proponent of this school of thought, is William James, and he researched deeply on cultural and intellectual influences to our behavior. So according to him, consciousness is an important aspect of every species. So other functionalists include William James, like I said. We have James McKim-Cattell. Yes, we have John Dewey here. Then these James McKim-Cattell and John Dewey, their own contribution came in investigating mental patterns or in development in children. Yes, mental patterns. Yes, they were the one that looked at those mental testing patterns in development of children in children. Yes, so the way they learn, how do children learn, the effectiveness of education in children, and all of those things, they were the one that looked at that. Yes. However, after the work of Ivan Pavlov, like we said in 1909, another school of thought emerged, which we called the American School of Thought, that is the behaviorism, J.B. Watson. Yes, so J.B. Watson, in their activities, was a theoretical orientation. So they proposed that science or psychology should focus only on studying observable behavior. Yes. For him, mental processes was not a proper subject for scientific study because they are ultimately private events. That is what J.B. Watson said. To the behaviorist, psychology should focus on overt behaviors. Yes. Overt behaviors, which is your response. Yes. And to observable events, the stimulus that cause that response. Two things: overt behavior, the responses, to observable events. So observable behavior, responses, and observable events, the stimulus that cause it. That is why they are called also the stimulus response school of thought. So another school of thought is Gestalt theory or school of thought, where we have Max Wertheimer, Kurt Koffka, and Wolfgang Kohler. These are the proponents. Initially, it was begun by Max Wertheimer and Kurt Koffka. Kurt Koffka and Wolfgang Kohler were his students or helpers, but at the point they became his colleagues. Yes. So, as you see, the structuralist said we should that psychology was a study of introspective, observable, and units. Yes, reports of units of those behavior. The Gestalt opposed it. They oppose we looking at individual units of experiences, but the Gestalt agreed with functionalists, that is activity of the William James. So as we know, the word Gestalt is a German word meaning the whole, like whole, W-H-O-L-E, right? So according to them, the basic tool for the study of the mind is perception. How you perceive it, the total meaning you make of it, not sensation. So they were interested in the principles of perception and organization. They emphasize on the fact that they say that when we perceive, that we organize in whole structures instead of separated or isolated parts like the structuralists were trying to propose. So the Gestalt psychologists, their major contribution was in their influence on principles of perception, problem solving, group processing. Yes, they gave what we call the law of perception, or we call it law of grouping. Before you group things together, there are things that must be present. Before you say this is this, before you fix the puzzle or complete the blank, there are things, or just as it sounds, before you say these things are together, there are principles to be met, and that's what we call principles of grouping or principle of perception, as I normally regard to them. So you see, one is law of good continuity. Law of good continuity, or you call it law of contiguity, stating that things that move together are same. Law of similarity, things that look alike are grouped together. For number one, if you see two persons working together, you term them as friends. You have already grouped them. That's the first law. If they work together, they are together. If they are similar, looking alike, they are together. That's their group. Then we have law of proximity. When they are close together, you can group them together. Yes, that is that one. Then law of closure. Law of closure, or that you are not seeing that aspect doesn't mean it does not exist. That's why some people can give you an idea that you can make it up and make the real sense. That you saw somebody from the window, half of the body, doesn't mean that that person is a half body human. But your brain has this principle to fill up and group that person as a whole rather than a half human, right? So this is the little introduction we are doing to the schools of thoughts that form the systems of psychology. If you check well, you understand that we have not talked about Sigmund Freud, and that will be our next introduction, and maybe the last video we're going to do. But I want to add here that these schools of thought we reviewed here are not exhaustive. Like we did not talk about humanistic school, we did not talk about the cognitive school. So in general about this course, you will notice that before our last video, maybe we will try to delineate several theories that are subsumed under several systems. But this is the beginning and how this school of thoughts or these systems, as we are regarding in this course, were formed. And these are the proponents and their contributions. Thank you, and see you in the next video. And please remember to subscribe to our channel.